Podcasting from Singapore and broadcasting all around the world. You're listening to the EdTech Chat Podcast with Craig Kemp, taking the pulse of educators from all over the globe and bringing what you need every week. When you need answers, you go to the experts. Created by an educator, for educators, and streaming to the world. When you're in need of inspiration or looking for your weekly hit of learning, the EdTech Chat Podcast is the place to come. Weekly discussions with educational experts, leaders and teachers, reviews of products for your classroom, prizes to be won, and much more. Now, over to your host, Craig Kemp.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the EdTech Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Kemp, and I'm thrilled to have your support as I embark on the journey of sharing learning in audio form. I am a New Zealand-born educator with more than 15 years' experience in both public and private education as a teacher and leader in New Zealand, Australian, American, and IB curriculums and frameworks. 8 years ago, I moved to Singapore with my family, and we now call it home. I have 2 and 6-year-old daughters, which gives me a unique perspective on the other side of the education fence. My last role in a school was in a large 3,200 student, 500 staff American international school as the head of educational technology and innovation, driving and upskilling the school community to integrate technology authentically and purposefully into learning while striving to always answer the why. In June of 2019, I left my school and started my own EdTech consultancy company called Ignite EdTech, which allowed me to own my own schedule and open up my support mechanisms to schools from all over the world. It also allowed me to continue my passion for speaking and leading workshops with schools and organizations across the globe. My work now consists of 3 major areas. 1, working with schools globally to support and successfully implement one-to-one device programs and rollouts. 2, leading EdTech-focused professional learning in schools and running workshops and speaking at conferences. And 3, now, more and more, I'm working with EdTech companies to advise and mentor them with their education entry strategy. From my experience as an EdTech leader in a school, I know all too well the frustrations that are faced when companies come knocking on our doors trying to sell their products. I found my experience has allowed me to give advice to EdTech companies to help them connect with schools more authentically to make a difference, rather than to make a sale. Some of the EdTech companies that I work with also utilize my services to help understand and enter the Asian market. I only work with companies that I believe in, companies that I would use in my classroom or schools that I work in, because I want to be able to advocate honestly. In addition to this, over the past 5 years, I've been consistently blogging at mrkempnz.com with hundreds of useful articles to help educators be successful and to share my experiences. In January this year, I realized, though, that I'd lost the passion for writing, and I stopped blogging consistently. Because of this drop of sharing, as a result, I also started tweeting and sharing less in my social circles, which in turn stopped my routine of learning. I needed a reboot, and a podcast was what I needed. I enjoy talking and sharing and needed an outlet. For 2 years prior to today, I had planned this podcast, but never followed through. I wanted a space for educators to listen and learn that was short, sweet, and to the point, and that you could engage with at a time that suits you, whether it's in the car, on public transport, between classes, or before you go to sleep at night. So here it is, the EdTech Chat Podcast. After 2 years of planning and thinking, I've finally forced myself to follow through and challenge myself to do something new. What's your new something? What's your latest challenge? Think about this as you listen today, and feel free to share with me. The EdTech Chat Podcast will be published every Friday morning Singapore time and will include interviews with leading experts, educators, and EdTech companies, stories from my experience as a teacher and leader, advice and tips on how to authentically and purposefully integrate technology, both at the classroom level and at the school level, and there'll be prizes to be won every week for those loyal subscribers and followers. Before we get to listen to the incredible Kath Murdoch talk about inquiry-based learning, her journey with technology, and her advice for educators, I wanted to briefly talk about something that constantly pops up in my social feeds and a question I get asked all the time. The question is, what is the best way to approach the use of technology in a school setting? Is it integrated or standalone? My advice always starts with a question, and I encourage you to always do the same. I always ask why. What is your why for technology use in your situation? Simon Sinek says this best when he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Before I can answer your question, I need to know your why. Is it to be more efficient, to help connect your students to the world, to help engage your learners, or to help them achieve greater success? The answer to this question helps inform critical strategic decision making. Every context and situation is different, and so our response is different. Many schools I work with have a dedicated technology syllabus as part of their curriculum that they need to ensure they teach, and others are open to making their own decisions. Most schools, though, are moving towards a more dedicated system of integrating technology into learning as a tool, just like you would a pen or a pencil, rather than a standalone subject. I see some benefit in the senior years in secondary school of computer labs and suites for specific subjects, for teaching coding or design perhaps, but I encourage schools to always think about their teachers' expertise before embarking on any change. Teacher professional learning must always come first. Assess and build the capacity in your people before they can successfully embrace change. If you have questions about your school's use of technology or would like to discuss how I can support you, please don't hesitate to contact me on craig@mrkempnz.com or via any of my social media channels. If you have questions that you want answered in this segment, please also reach out and I'll do my best to include it in an upcoming episode. Every week, I bring you a short interview with some of my edu heroes, an engaging learning experience with someone who makes a difference in education every day, with a particular focus or angle towards educational technology. This week, I had the pleasure of chatting with someone who many of you know and look up to, Kath Murdoch. Let's have a listen. Today, I have the honour of speaking with the incredible Kath Murdoch. You might know her as the Queen of Inquiry-Based Learning, or at KJ Inquiry on Twitter. Kath and I have been connected for many years, and I'm constantly in awe of what she's able to achieve. Kath is an experienced teacher, writer, university lecturer, and popular consultant, working with schools globally. She has authored 15 books, including her bestseller, The Power of Inquiry. She is widely respected for her work in the field of inquiry-based learning, in which she has taught, researched, and published for over 30 years. Kath, it is an incredible pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk education and technology integration?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me, Craig. It's lovely to be here.
It is an absolute pleasure. Let's get going. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
Sure. Well, my current role hasn't changed much over the years. The phrase that I always use when I'm working with children is that I'm a teacher who teaches teachers about teaching. And I've been that for quite some time. Specifically, my role continues to be to do all of that very much in the field of inquiry-based learning. So I guess my official title is that I'm an education consultant with a focus on inquiry-based learning. And as far as inspiration goes, I'm constantly inspired by lots of things. I think one of the beautiful things about working as an educator and being particularly in my field of inquiry learning is that you're just never short of things that make you curious, whether it be children, whether it be teachers, conversations that we have around the planning table, things that I read. I think I've got what Susan Engel describes as a hungry mind, and I think I chose a really great profession for my hungry mind. So, 35 years later, I'm still fascinated by it and count myself really lucky.
I love that. Hungry mind. I'm going to use that.
It's a great phrase, isn't it? It's not
very
mine.
I love it. So what excites you about education today?
Many things, but probably the thing that I'm currently really interested in, and it's what I'm writing about a lot at the moment, is I guess what I call that a field of personal inquiry. So I've been involved in inquiry-based learning obviously for a long time, but over the last sort of 5-6 years, we've seen a real growth in opportunities that teachers, and I work mainly in primary schools, but opportunities that teachers in primary schools are giving children to really learn about the things that they are inspired by and that they are interested in. This personalised inquiry, I think, is wonderful to see happening in schools. You know, for many children, it wasn't until the holidays or the weekends that they could explore the things that they love. And I'm just seeing more and more teachers understanding how children's passions can be the motivation for really powerful and deep learning. So I'm excited to see that happening right now in so many schools.
I've been to actually a couple of your workshops a long time ago now when I lived back in New Zealand, probably 10 years ago or so. And one of the things that I picked up from, I think, my first year of teaching, actually about 15 years ago, in one of your workshops in Dunedin. And one of the things I picked up was just that hunger to get kids to learn and ask questions and try something new and really love the learning process. And that's really stuck with me for all of these years. So in relation to educational technology and I guess where it fits with inquiry-based learning, what's your best advice for educators?
There are absolute experts and gurus in education technology, and I'm not one of them. Although, I must say, over the last 4 weeks in this very different world that we're living in, I have surprised myself with my technical prowess, Craig, and boy, have I learned a lot. So I feel a little better placed to answer that question at the moment than I might have, say, 4 or 5 weeks ago. But look, my advice is advice that you hear all over the place, but it's really important just to keep saying it, and that is ultimately, however fabulous technologies are, in the end we still need to place the pedagogy at the centre. So there's no point in using something just for the sake of it. We have to ask ourselves, well, what is it? What's the learning that we're really hoping to achieve here? And then, is this the best tool for that learning? And sometimes it will be a digital tool, and sometimes it won't be. There are times when I've made a very deliberate decision to say, I know I could use a digital online tool for the kids to generate their ideas, for example, but I'm deliberately going to get out a big sheet of paper and some markers because it actually serves our learning purposes better to do it that way. So, I mean, that's not to say I'm not using those digital tools, I am, but I guess the point is if we just use them for the sake of using them, then we're missing the point. And what we want, the digital tools have to really amplify the learning purposes that we have. So be clear about the purposes first, place the pedagogy at the centre, and then make the decision about the tools, whether they are whether digital or not. I think that would be my advice. And the second thing, because it's so relevant to the situation right now, I had this exact conversation with some teachers today, is be brave, be willing to jump into what James Nottingham calls, that beautiful metaphor, get in that learning pit and don't be afraid to be vulnerable and open, because it's such a fantastic model for our kids. If we're not, we're not adept with the technologies, then show our kids how we learn and how we try to grasp that and how we build our learning muscles, as Guy Claxton would say, while we're doing that. I'm seeing teachers do that everywhere at the moment, and I think it's so great for kids to see. So when it comes to the rapidly changing world of education technologies, rather than being overwhelmed and frightened by it, if you're in that camp, be open and jump in and learn and inquire. And you're a great model for your kids, and you'll surprise yourself.
I think that's amazing advice. It really is. I think as an EdTech consultant, that's one of the things that I see all the time when I'm working with schools. all over the world, and that's that there are a lot of teachers afraid to try. I think that you're the best person really I can have on the show to share that message. It's inquire, get in there, we go, try new things.
Yes, and I'm a good person to say it because, you know, I can be that person. I mean, I've been teaching for a very long time, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I was, you know, I remember the big old computers that first came out, and we were all so excited when we had our big Mac SEs or whatever they were, you know, in the office at school. So I've gone from, you know, learning what the hell an email was to where we are now, and that is how old I am, Craig. It's frightening.
I love it.
But all, you know, you have to keep dealing with your fear of the new and your fear of the unknown. But, you know, we're seeing this kind of acceleration pushed by a real purpose. You know, teachers are amazing. What's the word everyone's been using? Pivot. You know, we've all had to pivot our practice and really come to terms with that fear of technology if we have it. And I'm seeing such beautiful inquiry and growth around it in myself and in so many teachers. So, yeah, jump in, get in the pit. It's worth it.
I'm so pleased to hear that. And I think on that note as well, I'm a huge fan and believer of professional learning networks. And that's where I do a lot of my growing and my learning and my engaging and my boundary pushing. Where do you engage? And who should we be connecting with online?
Oh, wow. Well, I thoroughly enjoy the professional learning networks that I have. I'm probably more of a producer than a consumer in a way. I mean, I use it as a real tool for my own consulting, but I use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and my own blog, of course. And I love that they're tools to express and connect with people. And I think the best way to find out who I would recommend to follow would be to look at who I follow, you know, because there's so many. But just using the hashtag inquiry or inquiry ed or inquiry mindset, and you just instantly are connected with an incredible community of people. And I think we can all now curate our own personal professional learning through those platforms. It's amazing.
It is, isn't it? And I guess for you as a self-proclaimed, not a self-proclaimed tech guru, someone who struggles from day to day with tech use.
Yeah.
What's an EdTech tool that helps you get by? What's an EdTech tool that you're using right now in your day-to-day work that you have to tell everyone about here today?
Oh, God, I'm using the same tool that just about everybody is using at the moment. I'm zooming all over the place at the moment. So that's the one that just comes to mind instantly, that I'm actually finding really powerful for my work with teachers. I was also introduced to another tool that I have enjoyed playing with, which you might know, Canva, you know, one of the many tools where you can create some really lovely visuals and flyers, and I'm just playing around with that and being able to create something that looks a little less amateurish than some of the previous things that I've done. So, yeah, I was actually just playing with that before I got online with you. So I'm
That's great.
playing with Canva and Zooming just like everyone else is.
That's brilliant. And I love tools like Canva that make something so easy to look professional.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's amazing.
Kath, learning is really important to me, and learning is really important to just about every educator that I know. Can you recommend one book or one resource that you've been reading lately or investigating lately, or just one of your all-time favorite resources? And tell us a little bit about why we should be exploring it.
Okay, well, when I think of resources, I'm going to suggest one that a lot of people might know, and it's not really for professional learning, it's more for youth with children, but from an inquiry teacher's perspective, you cannot go past the beautiful site that is The Kids Should See This. I subscribe to it. Every week I get juicy email with a link to at least 5 amazing little clips, and each one of them is gold. You know, whoever curates the site really does know how to find the very best. So The Kids Should See This is a resource if you're interested in stimulating curiosity and inquiry. I would highly recommend that. I am loving the book at the moment. It was I think they're actually putting a second edition out, but another book that really is very dear to my heart is a book called Unearthing Why, Claire Britt and Jill McLaughlin's book, particularly for early years teachers, but it is the most elegantly written book and really goes to the heart of why an inquiry-based approach in the early years is so powerful. So that's a favourite. But you know what? Sometimes I go back to I think the older I get, sometimes I feel like I'm turning into a bit of a grumpy old educator because I hear people talking about things as if they've discovered them for the first time, and maybe that's just what happens as you get older. But I really think it's important that we keep looking back just to remind ourselves where some of the most extraordinary work that is around now has come from. So the other day I took off my bookshelf again the 1983 book by Donald Graves called Writing Teachers and Children at Work, and it is still a stunning read. I've revisited Joan Dalton's book, also from the 80s, Adventures in Thinking, which looked at amazing thinking tools and strategies. There are others that I could talk about, but I think sometimes those really seminal texts from decades ago remind us that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants.
I love that, Kath. Those resources are phenomenal. I'm definitely going to go back after this chat today and investigate a little bit more because they sound like the sorts of reads that I need. One last thing before we start to wrap things up. I think right now there are a lot of people in pretty difficult situations. Teachers from home, teaching remotely, some almost ready to go back potentially after all of this. From an inquiry-based learning perspective, what's your one piece of advice for teachers who are really struggling right now? How do you get the most out of these kids that have come out of this lockdown, being at home with family members and getting ready to really take the biggest bite that they can out of learning? And for some, in a very short amount of time before the end of the school year, what's your best piece of advice for them?
So is it advice while they're doing the remote teaching or advice on returning to the classroom?
Yeah, I think it could be a piece of advice either way, maybe. Give me
one thing that would benefit both, and I know many teachers are doing this. In fact, I was talking to some teachers about this today, and we were saying how important it was to check in even more than we would do in a bricks and mortar environment, to really check in with our students about what's working, what we could do better, what's not working, just really committing to getting regular feedback from our students about what's working for them as learners, and to use that to then continue to modify the way that whatever we're offering them. I'm hearing lovely stories of teachers making phone calls, having Zoom chats with kids just about this. You know, what's working, what can I help you with, what can we do better for you? And I think if we can bring that commitment to seeking regular feedback from our learners when we're back in the classroom, and bring that same mentality, you know, at the end of every week, even in a bricks and mortar environment, that we're asking our kids, okay, what's working? What do we need to do better? And that is a practice that means a teacher is embodying what we call an inquiry stance, constantly inquiring into their teaching and bringing that lovely curiosity to kids to say, I'm curious, what is working for you, what isn't, what can we do differently, how can we help grow your learning even more. So I think reflection, and then using that reflection to continue to change up what you're doing.
That's great. And I think that's the sort of advice that everyone needs right now. Let's take a step back and really think about that reflection and feedback cycle. I think that's really, really valuable. So Kath, what's the best way for everyone who's listening here today to follow and connect with you?
Look, any of those platforms I mentioned before, probably if you go to the website, which is kath@kathmurdoch.com.au. Hang on, that's my email. Just kathmurdoch.com.au. If you hop on the website, you'll see the links to the other things.
Fantastic. And I can't thank you enough, Kath, for talking today, but also for the inspiration you've given to me and thousands of other educators all across the globe from the work that you do. It truly is inspiring. I'm walking amongst giants here when I'm interviewing people, and I can't thank you enough, and I hope that we get the opportunity very soon to see each other face to face.
Thank you, Craig, and right back at you. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Kath.
Thank you for listening to the EdTech Chat Podcast, creating a community for educators to learn, share, and grow. If you liked today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and be in the drawing to win prizes every week. If you know others that would enjoy the show, please hit that share button and brighten their day. Join us again next week for your weekly EdTech Hit with @Mr. Kemp NZ. We'll see you again soon.